Hello, everybody. As you said, we are Group 5, and welcome to our Leadership Challenge presentation on bridging the digital divide. We've created a digital equity toolkit specifically for libraries and rural communities, but this toolkit can be used by other organizations or agencies. Now let's meet our team.
Good morning. My name is Jen Hooker, and I am a librarian too with the Santa Cruz Public Libraries.
Good morning. I am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Karina Huerta. I'm a Youth Services Librarian at Sunnyvale Public Library.
I am Kendra Johnson. I'm a librarian too at Stockton-San Joaquin County Public Library.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zoraida Martinez, and I am a senior librarian at the Santa Clarita Public Library.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Pan, the Education and Outreach Manager at the Hoover Institution Library and Archives.
In today's presentation, we will introduce our topic, talk about community partnerships. We'll go over the scope of the project as well as a case study, and then close with stating our ask and goals. Pop quiz. How many people do not have broadband access in rural communities in the United States? A, 10 million, B, 2 million, C, 14 million, or D, 100 million. Please type your answer in the chat box. We got a lot of answers. Thank you all for participating. Let's find out what the answer is. According to the FCC's website, 14 million people do not have broadband access. More than 42 million people cannot afford broadband access. And there are more than 227,000 unserved households in rural California. We've included a map of the areas that have higher rates of broadband subscription versus those areas that have lower rates. And as you can see, the highly populated areas like the Bay Area and Los Angeles have higher rates compared to the rural areas like Inyo, Modoc, or Lassen counties.
All right, go ahead, next slide. As many of us began to work from home at the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, the harsh reality of the digital divide, or the gap in reliable and stable internet access and technology, became more pronounced in many communities. We all know how difficult it can be when Zoom freezes during a presentation or the internet unexpectedly cuts out. But for many people, especially low-income households or those in rural communities, the internet can never cut out because they just don't have it. Often, public libraries are utilized as a space where those who cannot afford or otherwise cannot access the internet at home can come in to use our internet without the expectation of payment, interaction, or general fuss. However, those who rely on institutions like the public library were left in a lurch when the COVID-19 pandemic forced many public buildings to close, and many people began working from home. In order to help solve this issue, we created this toolkit for rural libraries to help bridge the digital divide in their communities. We hope that many libraries, in partnership with other community organizations, can use this toolkit to help work towards digital equity for all. One thing to note for users of this toolkit is that rural is a word with differing definitions that users should feel free to self-identify with. According to the US Census Bureau, rural areas are defined by the fact that they are not urban. This leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Luckily, they've added some more nuanced nuanced definitions. So we now know that rural is defined by areas with fewer than 2,500 people. According to the census, there are 11 counties in California that are defined as rural, whereas the Rural County Representatives of California group identifies over 30. For the sake of usability, we encourage users of this toolkit to define themselves as rural. As many of us know, there are also counties that have both urban and rural areas, and we don't want to discourage anyone from utilizing this toolkit. Moving forward, we will be covering the following topics, and I would like to make sure that we all have a common definition of these phrases. I've already covered the digital divide. Digital equity is the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. Digital exclusion means having no access to the internet due to the lack of access at home or the lack of infrastructure providing access to the internet. And internet computing technologies are any objects that offer access to information through telecommunication and may include the internet, cell phones, and wireless networks. The goal of this project is ultimately to provide rural serving libraries and related institutions with a step-by-step guide in how to work together to bridge the digital divide and better serve all communities.
Great. So now that you've heard more about the context of the digital divide in our toolkit and also the scope of it, I want to take a moment to have an activity with all of you and ask you this question, that there are many issues impacting our users, right? The digital divide issue isn't as simple as it appears to be, as you could see in this iceberg metaphor. The tip of it says lack of internet, but below the tip of it, there are a host of other issues. What other issues can you think of? Please share in the chat box. Great, someone shared a lack of infrastructure. Another person shared digital literacy, especially among seniors, and security. Certainly, these are all important issues here. Lack of device, how to maneuver the internet. And I see here funding. And I want to share that below the surface, thank you for playing this activity here. There are a host of issues, broadband speed, like some of you have mentioned, tying to infrastructure, technology skills and abilities, socioeconomics, public library access, language skills, comfort in using computers, and motivational skills. All of these issues really indicate that not one library or one entity can address this issue. We recommend, for example, community partnership creation, and that's what we'll cover next in the toolkit process.
So community partnerships could be public libraries. Some of us are already working in a public library, so we know firsthand the benefits of partnering with us. But if you're not in a public library, consider partnering with one for support to provide broadband resources to your community members. If you're already in a public library, you may want to consider partnering with other local libraries to expand your resources and the number of people you can reach out to, and also just to brainstorm ideas on how to approach a certain goal. School districts already have a strong connection with families in your community, so it would be super beneficial to partner with them. You'll reach community members that may not already visit the library. And like school districts, community or recreation centers already have a strong connection with individuals who could benefit from learning about the ways your library can help them connect to the internet and other resources. During the pandemic, we saw many libraries driving their bookmobiles to parks and other locations to help those without connectivity. So community centers can also be a great location to offer free Wi-Fi service or boost an existing signal. And then also private corporations, computer and technology businesses are already pledging to donate devices to those in need. An article in the journal states that, for example, Verizon is partnering with California to provide 250,000 students with unlimited internet service at a discount. So as we see, these businesses are already thinking of ways on how to help communities. It would be great to reach out to them. Maybe they can fund something or donate devices. And of course, City Council, reaching out to local officials or attending City Council meetings could benefit you to understand the workings of local government, learn names and which representatives you can reach out to, and also just to introduce yourself and meet other people. On the left of the screen, you see a template. This template roughly explains what to have in mind before you reach out to a potential partner. So as the image says, have a plan of action. So have in mind the goals of your organization and what resources you need to obtain these goals. Identify community organizations that have similar interests that will help you meet your goals. Designate a spokesperson from your organization. Create a contact list. So who are you reaching out to? Who do you want to talk to? Define the common goals between the community partner and your organization. So that means finding out more details about this potential partner. What are their goals, missions, and values? And so once you've connected with an organization, share decision-making, communicate frequently, be transparent, and most importantly, share the credit. If something goes well, make sure to also give the credit to those who worked with you. And now Kendra will go over contacting your local officials.
Thank you. Partnering with an elected official could be a potential barrier. So we've included some tips and suggestions on how to contact an elected official. Most officials are busy and have little time to spare, but if many of their constituents are experiencing similar problems, i.e. lack of connectivity, it might be wise to present an organized effort. A group of like-minded individuals that organize phone calls, town hall meetings, virtual or in person, and office visits. Share your results with the community, help increase the awareness of having adequate broadband access. And lastly, be sure to follow up with your elected official and thank them for their time.
As part of our toolkit, we have outlined some goals, listed objectives, and provided a tentative timeline guide to help those in rural communities with starting or continuing their work to provide access to their students and patrons. Some of the digital inclusion goals we have outlined are to provide a service to patrons who cannot access computers, internet services, provide a space where patrons can access resources, provide a starting point for other libraries, schools, and institutions. And these are just some of the goals that libraries and organizations can work on, as well as create their own. Goals can be tailored and changed in order to fit the communities that are being served. A starting point on how to set objectives for rural libraries is know how to determine these objectives and to get the help to bridge that digital divide in their areas. Libraries and organizations can start in two ways, and it could be by starting by analyzing with the SWOT analysis, which stands for analyzing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this can help institutions determine what they are lacking from broadband access to devices or more, determine where the strengths are within or outside the community, what opportunities are available from creating partnerships and funding, and what may be a threat or a setback when determining how to provide access to patrons, for example, infrastructure. The second way is to create a SMART goal, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, in order to help communities determine what it is that they want to accomplish and give patrons access to broadband services and devices, what is attainable, such as lowering bills and cheaper devices, what is the time frame in which they want to accomplish these goals, from a couple of weeks to months and even years. We have worked on a tentative timeline that libraries and organizations can use. The timeline includes things as creating a survey in order to see where the gaps are and where the community needs access to the internet and services. Communities may follow the suggested timeline and action items to start with seeing where the gaps are. in compiling census information to get an idea of where the patrons are located, how much each household makes, how the number of people in one household affects the access. Also by contacting local government to start a conversation on how they can get access to help with the broadband or even the infrastructure. Something else they can do is analyze and look at the infrastructure in the area and the region. They can help distribute the surveys in various means, including grocery stores and schools to begin with, by reaching those that do not have internet access at home. The use of social media can also be a really good idea, as well as local newspapers, radio stations, television, and even ads if possible. Working with local governments to get a survey out to the community. Setting a deadline of a couple of weeks to ensure an ample response of the survey. Research funding sources such as federal, state grants, and opportunities. Reach out to businesses in the area that offer broadband access and talk to them about the accessibility and the possibility of reducing bill amounts. Analyzing survey data and looking for gaps in the area can help identify the needs for each community and even each little pocket in the community. Reach out to state governments and create infrastructure for broadband access. Collaborate with community organizations and create a plan to implement broadband access in lower income communities. Creating programs to reduce bill amounts and or share information about existing programs. And lastly, but not least, assemble a coalition to develop a shared vision to help maintain programs in longer term. It's not just for short term. The idea is to help build something that's sustainable and long term for even those that do not have access at the moment or those that come after. And these are just some of the suggestions for timelines and objectives, but libraries and organizations can add more as needed.
Now we'll talk about the case studies and our ask for this project. So during our project, we had sent an informal survey to our colleagues and anyone else working in libraries that serve rural communities. And this was a snapshot of some of their responses in terms of what would be applicable in terms of how we support rural communities with broadband issues. And thank you for those who filled out that survey. So this is an infographic of best practices for technology services on digital equity. And we have highlighted the top 5 issues based on the responses as well as the literature that we saw that would be helpful for other libraries to consider. So one is expanding the reach of Wi-Fi beyond the library as a building. So some places have had it in their gardens or in the parking lot. 2, offer bookmobile or mobile library services to reach out to places that do not have Wi-Fi or internet deserts. 3, obviously purchase and lend out internet hotspot devices and laptops to patrons. But it ties in with number 4 as well, having a policy where you are loaning the equipment, but also ensuring that there are terms and agreements for the patrons to understand. And it ties into number 5, which is, if possible, waive the fines for technology loans, particularly during this time when it is very challenging for people, whether they're looking for jobs or also paying other bills that take priority. Waiving fines is also highly considered in connections to a policy and within your organization's work in lending out these devices. Now, with the survey, we wanted to highlight 2 case studies that came up in the responses. For this presentation, we'll focus on one case study, which you'll find in the toolkit. So we sent out a survey with informally with 5 questions, and we wanted to ask our colleagues what was going on during the pandemic and how did they serve patrons without internet access. And one of the questions came up with is, what did you do to support patrons who had limited technology access? And this particular librarian mentioned that they purchased over 100 hotspots and have them loan a long-term to families in rural areas. We also wanted to know what did not work and what would they have done differently. And so they mentioned obviously offering curbside services and virtual story time, but the patrons in such rural areas relied on the library's Wi-Fi to get connected. So if the library wasn't open, they could not participate in these programs that are held virtually. And they're also unable to participate in other activities like requesting books online and so forth. So the rural library staff has to call the people for them to pick up their libraries. This is an important issue because when the library's Wi-Fi doesn't get through, this becomes a major issue as it impacts not only the library, but also the communities they serve. In addition, there are these other responses that came up. We wanted to know how our colleagues were marketing digital services to communities, particularly those who do not have access to the internet. So this response came in where they marketed through different digital resources as well as websites, but also created posters outside the library facilities, for instance, in places such as community centers, post office, sharing it with local schools, and through the Friends of the Library. And in terms of this other response here, we wanted to know what other suggestions or thoughts that they might have regarding digital inequity. And so this response came in thoroughly. Need to get Wi-Fi connections to rural communities, which we all know, but it is ridiculous that so many high-tech companies in California, while there's no internet connections to so many rural areas. And obviously this is a challenge that will continue to persist, but if we're able to form more collaborations, community partnerships, doing advocacy work and so forth, hopefully there'll be some shifts and changes going forward.
Our asks and goals for this toolkit are to have full support from the California State Library by hosting our toolkit on their website to encourage sharing with schools and other community groups, and to distribute the toolkit over the CALEX listserv. And here are our references. And a special thank you to Christine Bolivar, Martin Gomez, Robin Holland, and our mentor, Liz Vagani. The bottom of this slide, we've provided the link to this presentation and our toolkit.